You have probably heard of global warming. It's one of the biggest global crises we're facing right now. It's melting polar ice caps, causing extreme weather fluctuations and natural disasters, and the list goes on. In this video, we're going to discuss one of its devastating impacts that is often not talked about, which is its influence on the metabolism of ectotherms. What are ectotherms? This term might be a bit unfamiliar, but you might know them as cold-bloods. No, I am not talking about vampires, but cold-blooded animals like salamanders, frogs, and turtles. Their cold name describes their never-ending struggle to stay warm. Winning or losing the struggle could mean life or death. Before we talk about ectotherms, let's dive a bit into how cells work. Organisms need energy to do anything and everything, to breathe, to grow, to move, you name it. All living things produce energy by a chemical reaction in the cell called respiration, where glucose is oxidized to produce carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Any reaction that helps an organism to live by providing the body with energy or using that energy for the body's growth and development are referred to as metabolism or metabolic reactions. So, respiration can be categorized as one. 60% of the energy produced by metabolic reactions are used to maintain body temperature. So, respiration should happen so that the body can produce energy to stay warm enough for bodily functions to occur. This is how non-ectothermic animals like us, other mammals, and birds maintain a steady internal body temperature, despite how cold or warm the surrounding may be. So how are ectotherms different? Like all living things, they also do respiration and produce metabolic heat, but studies show that they're not nearly enough to maintain a steady internal temperature like us. Ectotherms show behaviors like basking in the sun and going under the shade. These external mechanisms are described as their efforts to regulate their internal temperature. This means that their metabolism must rely on their environmental temperature. Let's do an experiment to see how an ectotherm's external temperature impacts its metabolism using mealworms. To measure metabolic rate, we're going to measure mealworms' respiration rate. As we discussed earlier, respiration is a metabolic reaction that happens in cells. So, metabolic rate can be calculated by dividing respiration rate with the mass of the cells, which we would be doing with our experimental results later on. We will measure respiration rate by recording how much oxygen mealworms use up. Okay, let's go. These are the things we need to set up our experiment. Feel free to do it with me in your lab or at home. First, let's set up our oxygen sensor. Calibrate the oxygen sensor using these settings. Next, measure 2 grams of mealworms. It might not be exact, and that's okay. Make sure you write down the exact weight of your mealworms. We will use that later in our calculation. My mealworms weigh 2.07 grams. Next, transfer the mealworms into a falcon tube. Secure the oxygen sensor into the neck of the falcon tube. Prepare a 20-degree water bath and submerge the falcon tube into the water, as shown here. Leave the mealworms for 5 minutes so that they can adjust to this new environment. Then click Collect to start recording the concentration of oxygen. You should see a decreasing trend since organisms consume oxygen during respiration. You should get a graph similar to this. The slope would be our respiration rate. I've asked my colleagues to repeat this experiment so we can average all our data, which can help get a more accurate result. These are the respiration rates of our cohort's data. To get the average metabolic rate, each respiration rate should be divided by their respective mass of mealworms to find the metabolic rate, and then an average of those values should be taken. This is the average metabolic rate which is also plotted as a bar graph. In this figure, you can clearly see that there is a difference in metabolic rate, with the value being higher at 30 degrees compared to 20 degrees. So we can conclude that external temperature do have an impact on metabolic rate, and that as temperature increases, the metabolic rate of organisms also increases. Let's make sense of this result. Reactions are basically molecules bumping into each other. Rate simply refers to how often the collisions are happening between these particles. If there is high temperature, then the particles gain more energy, they're more excited, and they bump into each other more. This explains why high temperature leads to high metabolic rate. Let's see what these results tell us about global warming. One of the effects of global warming is the drastic temperature change it causes in different parts of the world, with some places hotter while others colder than they used to be. Our experiment shows that high temperature leads to an increase in metabolic rate. Some of you might think, isn't warmer temperature a good thing? Since a higher metabolic rate means more energy for these organisms, right? You're not wrong, but that's not where the story ends. A study has shown that fast metabolism due to global warming speeds up aging in ectotherms. In other words, the lifespan of these organisms are shortened. Aging in the parent ectotherms seem to accelerate the offspring's aging pace as well. Faster aging creates stress on the organism's body and can result in less quality offsprings. These effects can eventually lead to the extinction of these species. Our experiment also showed that low temperature decreased metabolic rate. So colder temperature can slow down ectotherms' metabolism to alarming rates, since the particles would have far less energy to collide and so result in extremely low rate of metabolism. Studies show that low temperature can also affect proteins and other cellular structures that are essential for the species' survival. So to conclude, our experiment and other studies show that extreme temperature fluctuation caused by global warming can be deadly to ectotherms. Their decline can also impact other non-ectothermic species, since all organisms are interconnected through various interactions such as predation and competition. Global warming is a threat to a multitude of organisms around the world, including us, as we also depend on other organisms. Global warming is a serious issue, and it is important that we take accountability for our past and act now. I hope this video sheds some light on the possible extinction of ectotherms and the severity of this global crisis. I'll see you guys in another video. Peace.